Well, happy Friday, my friends. This has been an eventful week for me. I hope you've all had a wonderful week. I'm Erica Lukes, happy to be here on UFO Classified. And I want to thank all of my supporters and friends from all over the world who faithfully tune in every Friday night to add their thoughts, their comments, share their support. I appreciate you very much. I want to give it an especially big shout out to my Patreons who are helping with the show cost. This is wonderful. And hopefully someday we will be able to really, and we are doing great things with the archive. And I appreciate all of you very much. As you know, I have started a new exciting endeavor with my colleague, Jack Brewer, and my friend and colleague, Barry Greenwood. It is expanding frontiers research. And to me, this is going to be a very groundbreaking thing in the subject of ufology, quote unquote. We've been doing some great investigative journalism, and I believe that yesterday, we actually released a story that we've been working on for quite some time, and that made huge buzz, and we have had a lot of visitors to our site from all over the world. You can find that at expandingfrontiersresearch.org. And you can get in there to see this piece that we've worked on called Uinta County paid tens of thousands of dollars to Phenomicon speakers. And it is pretty mind-blowing to see what has been taking place at the expense of all of us here in Utah. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. And I want to thank, again, all of you, Tom, Lord Ludacris, Amy, Ken, Leah. It's nice to see all of you guys. I appreciate you very much. So I'm going to welcome Jack Brewer, my friend from the UFO Trail, who has done some great work over the years, and now we are in this combined effort. And I want to say, first of all, thank you for the hard work that you've put in on this latest article that we have worked on. And what are your thoughts about everything after you uncovered what you uncovered?
Thank you, Erica. I appreciate that. I think the story has some primary issues that I hope it inspires people to think about. One of those is transparency of government. Uh, that is an important part of the democratic process, and as Professor Hill aptly stated in the article when I spoke with him, that from federal to state to county to township governments, we should not expect our leaders to simply avoid breaking the law or to try to avoid um, violating their codes of ethics or their procedures as laid out in their governmental processes. We should hope that they will operate in the light in ways that instills confidence in us as voters and the public that rely on them for funding and decision making and steering our government. And as Professor Hall aptly stated, to advance the needs, the desires, the things that are important to the people, the public interests, to advance the public interests. And that's an important part of this story. What were some of your takeaways, Erica?
I think some of my takeaways, were, and I have a lot of friends in this community, near the ranch in the Uinta Basin, and they work very hard at what they do. They work with different domestic violence shelters. They work with children with special needs and things like that. And they're seeing that there are really limited funds or funds being cut from specific programs where they really need to be. They need to have funding and support, and yet there we see this this whatever this is, this conference is paid for, by us, and that is going to line the pockets of people like Travis Taylor and Thomas Winterton and things. And it's at what point, and I understand we need to drive tourism to specific areas. Of course, that's great. Everybody needs tourism to survive. I understand that the Uinta Basin is hitting a little lull with regard to the oil industry and things, and so they're trying to rev things up. But with the conference that I was at, I literally sat there, and I know that I've shared some pictures with you. I think, three-fourths of the conference room was empty. And so I'm not quite sure what spending, when you're losing money at something like that, you don't keep going and then keep making the same mistakes and you keep losing money. You cut off things and make adjustments where you need to. And so for me, it was just, it's sad. And it's also alarming to me that you could use government funds to support things and bring people to speak on topics that haven't been verified. I mean, that whole area is so rich in history, and there's so many things that you could bring incredible people to speak upon. And really, I mean, I think it would be wonderful to do something on 9 Mile Canyon or some of the petroglyphs and things. Instead, we're bringing in experts who are making assumptions about some of these petroglyphs and things in the area and equating that to the Nephilim and all of these things. And it's just like, wait a minute, this shouldn't be happening. And if our money is going away from certain areas and it is going towards promoting conspiracy theory, promoting things that aren't proven, and it's not making money, then there's a problem.
Yes, I think there's some great directions for research there, and the things you're saying as well. And I do feel that a big aspect of this is, one, regardless of the topic of the conference, the process is important. And as taxpayers and members of the public, we have a right and arguably a responsibility to ask about. And one of the big things that I'm getting from people that read the article is wow, who knew that Uinta County sponsored this conference? And that was my initial reaction as well. But I thought, well, maybe I just didn't know it. That wouldn't be the oddest thing. But as Erica and I were looking at websites of different events and trying to establish who operates these things, who to inquire to about various aspects of the event, at times it's noticeable that is absent from literature that different UFO conferences put out. And Phenomicon had a Gmail address to someone at the bottom of the page, and certainly did not overtly make it clear that this is a public supported event. And our records request to the county made that abundantly clear. And then it was confirmed by Leisha Colthart, who is the director of travel and tourism for Uinta County, that it is a Uinta County sponsored event. So we have a right and a responsibility to ask, how was this decided? What was the decision-making process? Who was involved? How did it come about? Ms. Colthart indicated that Thomas Winterton was involved in meeting with the city manager and some other of Vernal initially. But the point being that these meetings we should have it should not be unreasonable to ask for a summary of how speakers are selected, how their pay is selected, how their compensation is arrived upon. And the Vernal city manager, Mr. Binion, I believe was his name, if I recall correctly, did not, he averted from discussing that with me in my interpretation. I directly asked him in an email to summarize how speakers are selected and their compensation is arrived at. And he simply stated that an organizing committee that he qualified himself as a member of arrives at those things, and then informed me that he would not be replying to any further emails. That is one issue. How is this decided? As people who read the article or look at the attached documentation that was obtained from Uinta County of the payments made to speakers, we'll see that there is a big variance in the amounts. Some as little as $300. I think some probably weren't paid at all for attending events or whatever, while others went into the thousands, $5,000, $6,000 combined for their participation at various events. So it's reasonable to ask how that variance is arrived upon and how it's identified in the first place. Like what data is drawn from what speakers make around the country or at other conferences, or what's the procedure, who in the government decided, whose authority was it, and how was it decided? Is there a call for proposals, things like that? And so the whole procedure is one issue, and that would be the case if we were talking about a gym show, or hosting a basketball tournament or anything. It would be a matter of identifying how the event was formed and compensations were arrived at. Then another issue with this one becomes the subject matter. And so that makes that process all the more important, of how did we decide who would be paid to what amounts to lead tourists to believe that there are dangerous and potentially even life-threatening, as George Knapp claims, to the best of my understanding. I've seen footage of Dr. Travis Taylor claiming this, that these phenomena can be actually life-threatening. So there's a lot of questions of ethics here that we could pull out and explore tonight.
And I think those are all great points and they need to be explored. And so, again, I want to just, say hello to everyone. Hello, Ted. I'm really happy that you had such a great time over at GPAN, representing yourself and NARCAP. That looked like a wonderful conference. And Ted Rowe brings up the point that U.S. UFO conferences are little more than UFO shows, and it's about sales and marketing, which is absolutely true. And when there is a real science conference, they don't necessarily pay speakers and they don't sell tickets. And so I think that in and of itself is a great point. And I want to bring up the point that if you are doing something and you're promoting tourism and you're trying to get everyone involved in the area, then you aren't going around, as I have been informed, threatening people with lawsuits that are using the Skinwalker name, trying to sell a coffee or trying to, sell a T-shirt or things like that. I mean, I understand, great, you've got your trademark, but you want to work with your community and you want to support your community. And what we've seen from this group is they're really not interested in supporting much of anybody other than a close-knit group of people that is making money. I've also been, informed that from several different sources that, when they're filming the show, that things are happening, and they're definitely not the nicest of neighbors to people that live around the ranch. And that, again, is unfortunate. Last week, I believe a week and a half ago, maybe, Thomas Winterton put out a video on Facebook that he was really upset that there was a person flying a plane over the ranch, and that was, causing the production to shut down, and it was costing Brandon, $7,000 an hour, which is, first of all, ridiculous. Anybody, I believe, that understands the entertainment industry and the History Channel and things, you understand you're not losing money. You've got a huge, huge budget. And how do you account for rain or some of the other unexpected delays? I mean, it's very interesting, and you can do all of these things and fly drones over other people's property, and all of that, and scare livestock, and keep people up, but you're you know and but it's like you have to some point in time, there has to be a reciprocal relationship of mutual respect and kindness. And if this really is about supporting the community and things, then that is what it should be about. And I think that, we can see from the research that we have done that there really isn't much of that going on, which is unfortunate. And you also bring up a great point about the health hazards. And, to me, to continually hear about what the life threatening while people are getting cancer there, this has been a common theme with Jeremy Corbell and all of these people, George Knapp, over the years, and now this is being played out time and time again. Well, there's harmful levels of radiation, but let's have the former governor come out and let's say, I mean, this is Havana syndrome, we're linked to all of these things, but here we are taking a selfie with our weapons, at the old homestead. And so it just raises a whole bunch of questions. And I think that, we know, and I invite this group of people to give answers, and to come on the show and respectfully talk about the questions that all of us are raising, because it's not just us. There are many, many people who are raising these questions. So I would love to throw that out there. But yeah, the health hazards, I think that's a huge thing. And let's talk a little bit about that and the work, when you were reaching out to specific people to find out about the health hazards or lack thereof, and the response that you got.
Yes, I reached out a number of ways to Dr. Taylor, and I did not receive any responses. The same to Mr. Winterton. And I continue to extend those invitations to discuss their position. And if they choose to discuss it with me, I'm open to doing that by video conference or telephone, or however they would like, if they would like to explain their positions. It's absolutely extraordinary for Dr. Gary Nolan to claim a case of Havana syndrome that he attributes to a state actor took place at that property. In an interview I conducted with Dr. Kit Green, he asserted that he believes similar. It is absolutely extraordinary under those circumstances that we would load people on a bus and take them in that vicinity. That says to me that the people doing the marketing simply do not believe, for whatever reasons, that they're putting people in any danger. We reached out to the Utah Department of Environmental Quality, 4 different offices, and the Environmental Protection Agency. And we found no evidence that any Skinwalker personnel, cast members, production people, authors, or anyone else that are promoting this story have ever filed any reports with proper authorities about these alleged incidents. And in some instances, we found that they, in fact, have not. For instance, the Department of Environmental Quality, one of their water offices, water quality, responded that they had one incident within a mile and a half of Skinwalker Ranch, and that it was minimal and related to a minor oil spill on the road that was not believed to have created any type of water or soil hazard. And the Division of Waste Management and Radiation with the DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, they responded that they were forwarded from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in 2021 an allegation that was submitted to the NRC in 2020, and the federal agency forwarded it to the Utah agency, in which an individual explained that they believed there was a uranium deposit on the property in question, and that they believed that's why people were getting sick. And they urged the nuclear agency to do a secret investigation and involve the people on the ranch, and urged them to do this as a matter of national security. It could be interpreted as a somewhat erratic letter. And Utah rules, Utah public records rules state that they do not disclose the personal information on that allegation. I did FOIA the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and see if they choose to provide any further information on it. But interestingly, in the email response from the Waste Management and Radiation Division in Utah, they explicitly stated that there have been no complaints or contact with the owner or representatives of the property, so they have no reason to or means to investigate the circumstances further at this point in time. So that was a direct statement that that agency, that division at least, is not in communication with any of the people that have been getting paid to make these claims. Yet another issue that comes up with all that are the conflicts of interest when journalists and scientists, researchers are apparently paid greater value for the extent they promote these things. And I say that because George Knapp and Travis Taylor, for instance, were paid substantially more than some of the other presenters and attendees at the conference. And again, we would need to see the procedures and the policies and the guidelines, if they exist, that these speakers were invited, and how their compensations were calculated and formulated in order to know why they were paid exactly what they were. And again, it creates some potential conflicts of interest here when stories are asserted and spread. And as the city manager and the director of travel and tourism openly stated for tourism, that of course is the government's interest in the event. But it, from a scientific perspective and even an ethical perspective, we get into some really gray areas there when uh, your your value to an event and your potential compensation are pretty seemingly proportionate on the amount of unsupported and unverified stories you're willing to tell.
And I mean, it's the whole thing is just mind boggling. And for those of you who are tuning in just now, I just want to say thank you for getting up early or staying up late. I see a lot of friends from over in the UK, so thank you so much. And I also want to just say that we are talking a little bit about a conference that is being put on up in Vernal, Utah, and a lot of this is kind of based around a certain ranch that I talk about quite a fair bit in Utah, and they have been claiming for decades that there are portals opening up, that there are dangerous levels of radiation, that people are being exposed to orbs and things like that, and they're ending up with these health effects that are eventually killing them. And so there's a lot going on in this area, and we've recently uncovered on expanding frontiers research by doing a lot of FOIA requests and interviewing people in the community and also people in government, that this conference is being paid for by government funds, by taxpayer money. And so we are simply asking questions as to why, what are the protocols for doing this? Why would they be doing this when they're losing money each time the conference is being held? And why are people like Travis Taylor and George Knapp and Tom Winterton and Bryant Arnold getting such exorbitant fees? And is there, why would that be happening when, again, you could be spending funds, I would think, on other programs that could help the community in other cases. So just wanted to refresh everybody you guys are just joining in. And so anyway, Jack, thank you for letting me go off there, but I want to just show a photo that you sent me, and we can talk a little bit about this really quickly. So this is
That is part of the email that I was just describing. That was a response to a records request. It's a GRAMA in Utah, which is about government records, and is the Utah equivalent of the Freedom of Information Act. And this was their response, in which they provided me the allegation that was made in 2020 and forwarded in 2021 to the Utah agency. And the bottom sentence there, I found rather significant. Unfortunately, because the property is held by a private entity which has not sought the division's assistance for any incidents that may have occurred on site, the division has been unable to follow up on the allegation at this time. So that is overt confirmation that the property owner and the people on the ranch are not reporting these alleged radiation levels that are supposedly harmful, and the things they say rather frequently on sensational cable television shows and at conferences being paid for by their county government.
Right. Yeah, and that is pretty interesting. And you would definitely think if there was a genuine attempt to use science to study the unknown, that they would also be working with different agencies if there are potential threats to people in the area or on the ranch. So again, that brings up the question of the validity of all of the claims that have been made for so many years.
Yes, one of the issues that I would like to offer Mr. Winterton an opportunity to discuss with me And the reason I was reaching out to him is he has made repeated claims over the years of sustaining head injuries, and he has indicated that he has an interest in the Havana syndrome research for these reasons. And I'm at a loss why these would not be reported to environmental agencies, or the type of things that Dr. Taylor talks about and George Knapp talks about, these potentially life-threatening contagions, this alleged hitchhiker phenomenon. I don't understand why this is not reported to the disease control authorities, and it does not bode well to view such circumstances. And I am simply at a loss how Mr. Winterton could tell us about these head injuries and the circumstances and invite people to visit. I do not understand that. And I do not understand that from the county officials either. And their responses to those types of questions were, in my opinion, somewhat aversive. And they stated to me, I did not hear that specific assertion. I did not hear that claim. And to that, I would say, well, you have a responsibility to know what's being said at these events. And it is widely known and all over television and all over various research forums. Mick West Metabunk goes into a number of these allegations of radiation levels and things like this. It's widely known among the community of people who would be attending the Phenomenon event that part of the draw is the potential hazards that these phenomena purportedly cause. And it is mutually exclusive to claim to believe these allegations and claim it's a good idea to take people's money to bring them to this location. So it kind of has to be one or the other. And to people that would say it's tourism, there's some things that are different about this circumstance than others we might run into. And I would like to say that EFR, Erica and I, and Mr. Greenwood, the organization that we're working on right now, does have some open records requests, and for instance, to Roswell. And what we anticipate seeing there are some different circumstances than speakers are paid by a municipal body. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think we're going to see that from Roswell. I have participated at Roswell before, for instance, and the event I was at was not sponsored by the city. While the city may put on a festival and take responsibility for advertisement, maybe some billboards, maybe some decorations on street lamps, we get into a whole nother area when the government is running the actual conference and paying the speakers and giving them financial motivation for the things they're doing and saying out of public funds. That becomes a whole different area of inquiry.
Absolutely. And I think the really interesting thing is, you can have, you've got something like Comic-Con, where, I mean, everybody knowingly goes there, and it's a science fiction, I mean, you dress up and you have different, presenters that you're listening to, but there's always that, okay, well, this is, there's, this isn't based in reality. And had the people at Skinwalker um, actually just said some of these things and given themselves an out instead of doubling down and saying this is real, we have the data, A, B, C, and D, then it might have been a little bit easier. And I have to, and I've often kind of scratched my head at whoever is responsible for their publicity because, or they're doing their marketing and PR because they're not doing a very good job when it comes to making sure that there is that out, and things, because this is not good. It's not a good PR look um, when you're, when things like we've seen happen. So,
Well, yeah, it, like I was saying, it's just mutually exclusive. And that is what makes it different from other circumstances and other festivals and other events. Like I recall once the city of Roswell's mayor was asked, "Do you believe in a crashed spaceship?" And tongue in cheek, he said, "I believe in Roswell." And I think that's reasonable. I think that's fair enough. Um, and it is a marketing ploy, a tourism ploy. If people want to come to town and celebrate, he is making an opportunity for vendors to then work within their own guidelines, and it's customer responsibility, buyer beware, and things like that. And then this is where skeptics always get, the organized skeptic movement has its set of ethics, and then debates that with others that might present other material. And so where we get into the gray area is when the government is funding that other material, and when it is not overtly posted, when we have a lot of people going, wow, who knew that was going on, when we have people financially benefiting that are involved, apparently, reportedly, in the decision making process, we have responsibilities to ask, can we take a look at this, and can we increase these standards perhaps? And that should be what writers do, what journalists do, and what elected officials do.
right, absolutely. And I think that, you go back and you look at some of the news reports that have come out of the Uinta counting. And good morning, Helga. Thank you for being here from Norway. You're so wonderful. And thank you again for all of your wonderful pictures. I hope I can get over and see you soon. But I want to just read this and throw this out here. So by Leah Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune on October 14th, 2021, reported that the Utah State Office of the State Auditor had released a report chiding Uinta County for bad accounting practices and improper spending of federal funds meant to address the coronavirus pandemic. Interestingly enough, a certain person involved with the ranch was on the COVID relief board for the governor. The state's audit, which evaluated the county's 2020 finances, identified 13 problems spanning the entire spectrum of government accounting, from its tone at the top to its day-to-day management of funds, according to a news release issued on Wednesday. County commissioners blurred the lines of accountability when they took budget responsibilities from the county clerk's auditor, according to the audit. The clerk auditor, in turn, lacks the requisite skills, knowledge, and expertise to prepare financial reports.
Wow.
And some officials circumvented policies for procuring contracts and internal controls, the audit found, creating a perception that those internal controls were not important. And I'm going to continue with this because I think this is really relevant. So, but what spurred the audit and resulted in some more significant findings were complaints about the Commission's decision to spend pandemic relief funds to expand a tubing hill and to award business grants to their family members. We received multiple
Mm.
anonymous whistleblower tips expressing concerns with spending of certain COVID relief federal money, State Auditor John Dougal said in an email to the Salt Lake Tribune. When Congress passed the Coronavirus Aid Relief and the Economic Security CARES Act last spring, it directed the state of Utah to direct and oversee funds in most of the state's counties due to population and size. Uinta County received 5.1 million. The audit found that nearly 3.5 million went to business economic recovery grants in the county, but officials overseeing those dollars didn't do anything to verify or document whether applicants had been impacted by the pandemic. And I've got one more paragraph I'm going to read of those
Please do.
grants. Yeah, of the grants, 117,000 went to companies owned by certain county officials and their immediate family members. The Tribune previously reported that Commissioner Bart Haslam's son received $20,000 in CARES Act money for his aviation business, and Haslam's wife received $20,000 for her travel business. Commissioner Brad Horrock's son also received a total of $77,000 for their RV farm, energy, and hunting outfitter business. Another $243,000 went to purchase equipment for the Buckskin Hills Ski and Snow Tubing Hill, the audit found, which was not adequately documented. The governor's office had questioned why the equipment couldn't be leased instead to meet the needs of a public health response, and some funds that didn't have in there. So here, you've got questions clearly going back quite some time with the misappropriation of funding. And when you look at what we've uncovered here, I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that some of these funds would be going to, say, Senator Winterton's son, and things that they're involved with there. But it is, again, it's pretty mind blowing.
Yeah, the people you were reading about there is the same chair of the county commission that I've been reaching out to for 2 weeks that has not been responding. I don't have anything to even add to that article. I mean, it was clear. I mean, I don't know what to even say to that other than like state the obvious that's what sunshine laws and codes of ethics are for, to prevent.
And you would think that, yeah, absolutely. And
I
so,
mean, this isn't a big intellectual knot to untangle here, I mean,
and it really is like when you just ask simple questions and you look and do a simple search of the internet and you see questions raised by public officials, and you notice that, okay, this person serves on the governor's economic advisory board. All of this money is going here. This is what's happening over here. Here are the connections. It's not really hard to figure out. And, again, I think that this thing that I want to stress, especially with, this particular area, which I'm invested in because I know people in the area, because this is part of my state, because I believe that there are incredible people that are living on the periphery of the ranch and running businesses and things. And I know that they deserve the best. And when we look at it, in the ufology lens, then we see people that are trying to do good research that are being, pushed down by this kind of nonsense, because you're trying to represent and trying to promote a serious study of the subject. And then you get this lack of transparency, statements that are being made that are absolutely unscientific and ludicrous. And you have, you just watch a certain TV show, and I think I mentioned to you when we were talking earlier, I was watching a portion available on YouTube, and the idea of science is throwing smoke bombs into a cave, and we're shooting rockets up, or there's there's to me, I'm not quite sure what's going on, other than a lot of grown men playing with toys. And again, stressing the whole point of everything. And I want to say hi to Tracy, and Luis and everybody. Sean, thanks so much, Simon, Kelly, so Tom. But again, if we want this subject to be taken more seriously, we have to shine a light at these particular things that are taking place, because this is all verified by doing grammar requests. All these things can be shown to be the fact by reaching out to public officials. Okay, why aren't we doing that job? Nobody seems to be reaching out and doing the work to make sure that we're getting all of these things on the record. And that's where we can really make some great change, by showing this, by showing that things aren't factual, and then by moving on to areas that are productive and good research, and we can move the ball forward. But that can't be done until we do what we're doing.
Yes, you bring up some very good points there, Erica. And I think back about talking to Dr. Green, and he wrote a paper in that made its way into the BASS and OSAP orbit, and it was pretty critically unaccepted. And when I spoke with him about various things, and when I would bring up proof, or can you back up any of this? One of the things that varies a little about Dr. Green than many of the people that populate our latest article is Dr. Green's like, nah, I can't prove nothing. I don't even have a hypothesis yet. That was his statement. I am still in the pre-hypothesis stage. The people at that conference are asserting fact, and they are making bold, sensational, arguably often absurd claims. When we, you, I, some others in the research community have reached out to some of the cast members and ranch personnel in the past, one of their talking points is don't rush us. We're working on it. I've always felt there's a reasonable time frame for Dr. Green or anyone else to decide if after 30 years you don't have a hypothesis, maybe you don't really have anything. Okay, we'll give the current ranch personnel another 6 years if they want it. Whatever, it's their ranch, they can do what they want. But if it's too soon to show us the proof, it's too soon to call it fact at a conference paid for by the county government.
Absolutely, thank you. And that is so eloquently put, and that is very true. And I think that's one of the things that you see in the first episode of the show on the History Channel is, they're flying over the ranch, and the first thing they're doing is offering a prayer. And so, to me, it's like, okay, wow, that's wonderful. We all have, people have religious beliefs, but what is that saying right out of the gate about the show, about the intention, about the direction? I don't know. There's some red flags that come out, pretty quickly. So, and I just, I know that, as I've mentioned so many times before, and yes, Kelly, yeah, they did say a prayer in the helicopter, because apparently, there might be an area where they were crossing over. I think that was, there's some trouble with aircraft and losing signals and things, even though, again, nothing's ever been reported to the FAA with regard to anything like that. But, what are the facts? But we're going to pray. So this is good. And, as we've seen in the first season, which was very controversial in many ways, because you had these so-called science projects when you have, we know Bigelow had put up bait pins, for whatever. The rumor was they were putting pregnant women in these bait pins to lure in the objects. And the more I learn about the facts in the case, the more I think, oh my lord, how really dense can we be? I mean, clearly, oh my god, there are three bait pins, and he's putting people out there. I mean, talk about some sort of bizarre. I mean, that in and of itself would, I mean, that could be questionable, I would imagine, legally. But anyways, so yeah, and the alpacas. Thank you for bringing that up. That's just where I was going to go. But then also using baby alpacas, having that bright idea to put baby alpacas in a fence that isn't even secure enough that the reservation dogs can't get in and maul all of them. And from what I understand, all of them, died. They were viciously attacked and had horrible deaths, I'm sure. And so, and then of course they're showing that with a camera that is obfuscated. You can't really see it. It's the same thing from when the Bigelow boys were talking about, they had a security camera and all of those, things that were taking place and the wires were cut and all of this crap. It's like, well, okay, I mean, obviously you guys are saying that because what you're filming is, you know, reservation dogs killing baby animals. We know PETA loves you. That's great, and then you've got all of the other things, and so it's just, and yeah, Tom X, pregnant women in bait pins. That was the rumor, and just all of these stories. But it's like, oh my lord. So you've got first season, starting off with a bang, doing some of these things, and how it could even keep going, and some of these questions about what's going on. I mean, I can't believe the History Channel, at the end of the day would think that some of these things were okay. And I wonder if anybody has reached out to the History Channel to get their comments on some of these things.
I had tried in years past on various events to, um, like I remember on the Unidentified, I think was the name of the show. I tried to get some statements clarified about, I think, if I remember right, they were kind of flip flopping on what titles they were assigning to some people as former um, civil servants and intelligence employees. They were kind of flopping from one episode to the next on what they were calling them, and they did not respond to my request for comment on how those titles were getting arrived at and why they were changing. And I think that's a good point too. Yeah, there's so much to unpack here that it can be kind of challenging um, to come at something like this because there are so many aspects to it that each deserve attention. Um, like we were saying, there's the science. These people are claiming to be doing science and have boldly unsupported assertions and avert from discussing them with people like me that want to inquire critically. This never bodes well because people that have the documentation of what they claim to have would like to produce it and have it published and have it spread around. So that's always concerning. It's more concerning when they're claiming things that we don't have a systematic showing of information and data that lead us to that conclusion. That is more concerning. Then we have the circumstance where it's being funded at Phenomicon by a county government that is averting from disclosing the process that it happened under. In defense of the clerk auditor office and the travel and tourism office, they were more than adequately forthcoming with the records requests. And I appreciate that Ms. Colthart would speak with me and that she gave me some time and attention.
Right.
That stated, there are more reasonable questions that are not being addressed by the county commission and the city manager. It's reasonable to ask who is on this organizing board that he spoke of. Can we access them? Can we see meeting minutes? Things like this are reasonable questions that make it different than if our buddies invite us to speak at a gig in Tampa, and if we sell enough tickets, we can pay for our motel rooms. Makes it altogether different. And then it makes it different still when that government is paying people that are essentially saying it's dangerous to come here. I hope we get the attendance up next year.
Right. I know. I mean, it just flies in the face. It makes no sense. And so I just want to show some things and that you sent me earlier. So let's
Sure.
show this and some of the fees that were paid.
Yes, what we have here is this demonstrates the variance of what speakers were being paid. We can see the first speaker was appropriated $300 in this payment. Debato LLC, as reported in our article, is owned and operated by Mr. Winterton, and it was offered a payment of $1,300 in this specific circumstance. Ryan Skinner's Enterprises in the next line was offered significantly less, and so on. We can see that Christopher O'Brien was offered $2,300. And these, by the way, are single payments. There were often multiple payments made to different speakers. And in this one, that just does show us the variance. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not only reasonable to ask why, how, like what's fine, just show us the process. Perhaps it makes perfect sense. Perhaps it's been adopted and agreed upon by a certain body that was empowered to do this. It's reasonable for the taxpayers to want to see that adoption and know what the process is. And one of the reasons it matters is it shouldn't be arbitrary. And like if one person's given 1,000 and another's given 300, well, why not 3,000 and 1,000? Or why not $100 and $15? There should be a process. I do have a background in proposals management, nonprofit management. And one of the things that is typically done in some non-government entities and government entities when they are making salary requests or compensation requests, they will show circumstances and examples of what similar positions are paid in relative circumstances. And so there's just a lot of questions here. Yeah.
Right. And I'm just going to show the next slide
Please.
quickly.
Yes, this one shows, again, the different amount that speakers were offered. A $500 travel per diem, $1,100 to one speaker, and $3,800 to Dr. Taylor. This was in 2021. And again, I'd like to emphasize that a number of these people were paid for multiple things. This
Mhm.
would be like just what he was paid apparently for speaking. Then there would be an amount, say, for attending the VIP lunch
Right.
or for attending the behind the scenes skinwalker dinner and things like that. And over the 2 years, the two phenomenons that were held 12 months apart, Dr. Taylor received, I believe, north of about $10,500.
Okay, let me just show this next.
And that is revenue reported received by Ms. Coldhart's division, the Travel and Tourism Office. And Stride, a company that handles tickets and events, collects the money apparently for the county and then um, disperses it to them apparently in these payments that were shown by travel and tourism to have been received. And so I added these up, is how I came to the total revenue. And I added up the other sheet that was obtained for the 2021 um,
And would that be
debit.
it? Is this it?
Now, this is 2022, I
Okay.
believe.
Okay.
Yes, and yeah, like yeah, it was simple math. Just add up the payments and then add up the revenue received, and I had the totals for 2021. We're here for 2022. We can see that Stride um, offered or dispersed about 124, 125,000 in payments,
Okay.
and they were who handled the website. Phenomenon.net takes you to Stride when you purchase your tickets, your entry, or your add-ons, as the city manager put it, for a tour or a VIP meal or something. And um, Stride also has a web page that you can just go to directly and purchase Phenomicon products and services.
Yeah, it is interesting. And so Tom X, you ask a question of if you wonder if any of the Uinta County officials have type of personal or business connections with the people who put on the conference. And it's a very small town, and I would say that they're, I mean, what are your thoughts, Jack, on that?
Well, that is certainly deserving of more scrutiny. Um, I don't want to get into accusations or
Right.
finger pointing. The article you read does plenty of implying in itself and is apparently um, solid reporting if it made it to print. Um, but these issues are the reason I contacted Professor Hall, who is an expert on government ethics at Webster University and is featured rather heavily in the article of these types of questions are the kind that we should not be afraid to ask and should not be treated as villainous for asking, and should expect our media, our public officials to show and raise their own standards to a level we are proud of rather than simply avoiding noncompliance.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I thank you for answering that. And I want to just show then the next slide that you have.
Yes, and this is the end of the 2022 debit sheet. And you could see on the first one that they raised 124,000, and this is what they reported spending. And you can also see here the remote viewing workshop, which is a rather questionable activity for a county government to be participating in. Um, then you can see again a variance here of a VIP dinner with Jeff Meldrum. The column on the left is who was paid. The dollar amount is how much it was, and then there's a description of the event. So here we can see Jeff Meldrum was paid over $300, where we can see Russell Acord was over 1,000. Um, we can see some other things there. 18,000 to a media company that it would be reasonable. I didn't get far enough with anyone to inquire what they did and what they do, and what products and services were delivered for $18,000. But this gives us the total of the 2022, and that's where I got that figure
Okay.
with the other.
And it is really interesting. Even, I know at some of the private conferences that are being held, it's really unusual that you would get multiple fees for different events. Usually it's you get a speaker fee, and if you're lucky, you have hotel, accommodations, and food, maybe one meal a day that you're paid for. But if you're lucky, but to have these multiple reimbursements, multiple checks for different things is just really curious to me for sure. So,
Yeah, and as the codes of ethics that Professor Hall referenced stipulate, an important part of that process would be identifying who benefits from those choices. Um, how much were the people involved in those choices that are part of those tours or lunches or speaking engagements?
right. And again, I just go back to the question you've got you've got people in need in that community. You've got funds that are going to the local food, food donation bank that are maybe 15 grand, a year. You've got all of these areas that really could use some funding, and it's being wasted, in my opinion, on certain things like this. And I'm not going to say that people shouldn't be reimbursed for their time, because they absolutely should. We all spend a lot of time doing research. There's travel time taken away from your family, your business, and so it is correct to think that people should be reimbursed for that. But where you have the major discrepancies in pay, where you have multiple payments, where you have, especially with, like you mentioned so much, with your wonderful statements that you collected from Hall, you have questions about what the process was. There has to be a process. There needs to be accountability and a paper trail for all of this, and there clearly is not. So it's just very, very curious.
Yes, and when you bring up, Erica, the decisions about allocation of funds, um, he mentioned a quote to me that obviously came to mind with him during in the conversation we were having, Professor Hall, attributed to Abraham Lincoln about any man can stand adversity, but if you really want to test character, give give him power. And one of the flavors to me that this had running through it was a certain entitlement and privilege that the rules don't apply to those that think they know what needs to be done and should be done, and that the accountability doesn't apply. That perhaps we don't have the right to even ask as far as they're concerned. And there is a certain entitlement and privilege to not even bothering to post that you've made these decisions.
I love it when you ask questions. You're the bad person for simply holding people to standards, and
Yes.
behavior that's interesting.
If I may jump in for a second, there was a gentleman, J. Pat Brown, that used to work with Muckrock, and I considered him um, to offer me guidance on some FOIA questions and how to read files I got and things like that. And he wrote a number of good articles at Muckrock as well. And one of the things that he wrote was a statement to the effect of, just by taking a page out of a document somewhere and bringing it to light, we are providing an otherwise hidden, if not stolen, history. And I think that very much applies to this circumstance. And it does speak volumes if people who do that are painted as villainous. And it also, I think, gives us a gauge of how much gaslighting goes on in the paranormal community. And after I had been dancing with this crew in Northeast Utah, when I got Professor Hall on the phone, it was like I was just speaking to somebody from another planet that speaks a different language. There is so much um, spinning and gaslighting and deflecting blame and responsibility going on.
Well, and that, it's true. And it is really interesting to me because I was speaking to Barry before, the show, and he, stated what you were stating, and Professor Hall had said, when you're bullying or when you're throwing blame back at somebody, you're distracting from the questions that are being asked, and that shows that you don't have the information that you're being asked to provide. And so I think that's really powerful, and that's exactly what's has gone on. That's exactly what has been, going on in the UFO topic for decades. And so it's very, and you can just see that plain as day on social media, especially on Twitter. It's an interesting thing to watch.
You're absolutely right. It's the UFO playbook that when asked to um, verify an assertion, asked to come up with the goods, as my buddy Banal says, show me the alien. Just show me the alien, man. Um, People, it's just decades. They'll call it backbiting. What's with the negativity? You and Leah Prime discussed this last week. Of, at some point, it's irresponsible not to take a side, and to say good vibes only. It's up to the leaders of a community to make their stand on issues of controversy. And I, uh, I believe that we did a good investigative journalistic project. I think we presented it properly. I think that we simply presented what we found, and it can talk for itself. In this video cast, we might editorialize some of that and discuss what it meant to us, how we felt about it through the process. But the actual documents speak on their own. The data we gave, the statements from environmental agencies, the allegations that have been presented, the assertions that are unsupported speak on their own. And the lack of verification from people that arguably act quite irresponsibly with their statements and claims speaks on its own as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it is so true. And so I just, the whole thing is quite interesting. And I know that Peter had mentioned back 20 years ago that he attended a conference in the Bay Area with Lynn Kitai and Colin Andrews and AJ Javard and paid for, specific events, entrance fee, and then specific events. And again, that, I mean, that's not sponsored by our government. That's not. So, and I think that's the big issue here is why would these funds, obviously, there's something, obviously we know, and like you said, the facts are the facts. This is all reported here in this article, and people can see that and then ask questions or respond accordingly. And I want to, if I can, really quickly, so just keep talking there for a second because I'm going to try to share this.
Sure, sure. I don't think it can be overemphasized that there are different parts of this story that are important. And one is the process, like Erica was saying, regardless of the subject matter of the event. Any event, be it a gym show, a basketball tournament, or anything else that is government sponsored, the taxpayers are entitled to ask how that came about and to expect it to be overtly displayed that it's a government function. And we are entitled to understand the process of how participants were selected. Why was this business owner given the cold shoulder? Why were these people embraced to the tune of 10 grand? Those are reasonable questions. They're public funds. Then we have a circumstance in which we have the subject matter that is relevant. So while the process doesn't really relate to what they're talking about or what their area of interest is, it becomes relevant when those topics go beyond the pale and go beyond reasonability. And that's not a subjective interpretation. That's not just my call. They kind of paint themselves in a corner on things like that by claiming that there are deadly, toxic, harmful contagions coming out of Uintah County. In one instance, George Knapp claims, as does Dr. Taylor, all the way back to the Virginia area, this hitchhiker phenomena. As I pointed out in the article, they have yet to verify that the alleged phenomena even exists, much less its hitchhiker add-on. So this is when the subject matter becomes relevant. And it's just buyer beware when we're talking about a privately owned company, an entertainment company, something like that. When public funds are being used to promote these ideas, and the people are arguably, it would deserve more scrutiny that there might be conflict of interest about the extent they're willing to discuss these things and be considered for greater financial benefits for their services becomes at issue. And that's where we need to see that process. How was this decided upon? What did the county administrators, the people on the organizing committee, how was it decided, and were any of them involved in the process of benefiting? So these types of things become important. Then there are yet more aspects of it that become relevant, as Erica and I have been pointing out, that to villainize those asking these questions is a very, very inherent to the UFO community and to the paranormal community that it can become like arguing religion, in that we're not really looking objectively at information presented and trying to falsify it. And that would be happening in a manner that we were sincerely compiling and presenting research. It's a red flag when people don't want to defend their actions and explain to me why they did the things they did, and explain head injuries, nauseations, getting nauseous, and how they arrive at attributing that to some unseen force on a piece of property. We just have speculation on top of speculation on top of speculation that arguably makes for entertainment that people find compelling. There are entertainment companies that are capitalists, that are capitalizing on the circumstances. That is different than tax funded government bodies making these decisions and then averting from sharing that decision making process.
Absolutely. I love it. Amen. That is so true. And I think, again, and like I can't say this enough, for me to, I think for them to be putting out the dangerous health effects and all of these things and to be putting that into people's minds. And I remember, watching Jeremy Corbell's movie about the ranch, which was, a little a little difficult to make it through the whole thing, but I did. And to see the scene where he is talking with a mother and son, and they're talking about, um, just the different trauma. They saw a UFO, and then, you've got the son that's having health issues, and basically, Corbell is leading the mother into saying, well, this is because of a UFO UAP exposure that your son is having these health issues.
Hmm.
And so when you throw things like that out there without any verification, it's like, how can you have a good conscience? I think, in my own opinion, I don't think that makes you a very ethical or kind or thoughtful person, to play on people's emotions and sympathies like that. And to see people in the community up there, and I've mentioned this time and time again because I really feel it's important, and this happens in many places where conferences are being held, or many UFO kind of little communities, side communities. You have people that are potentially vulnerable and that are being preyed upon by some of these nefarious characters for their own sick pleasure, or for another motivation, to have a cult following. And it's really, it's disgusting, it's disturbing. And as I pointed out, when I was at that conference, I met a lot of lovely people, not PhenomenCon, but the other conference up there. I met some wonderful people, and I love the people in the community. They're wonderful. But then I saw some things that really bothered me, and I believe these things need to be addressed. And I don't. So I don't know. For me, it's just kind of, the whole thing has left me very, very sad and disturbed to see people being hurt and manipulated and brainwashed in a way, and then having, a government, our, fearless leaders funding this effort, and then not really understanding what's going on. Do they really not understand? Do they not care? Or are they somehow involved in getting money from all of this?
Right, right. And I'll go ahead and say that because of Erica's concerns that she saw at one of the conferences and voiced, she was called a slimy malcontent by one of the people that are looked up to and considered a leader of these unsupported narratives and in that community. There it is. Shazam, slimy
I
malcontent.
know, I love that. I
There it
keep
is.
promising I'm going to get those printed up. So
And this in itself is just such a red flag that um, like I hope that um, media companies that people ask us about our organization. I hope media companies ask me, can you back up those assertions? We have been approached by a couple of professional journalists, and I am proud to tell them everything's linked right in the article. If there's anything else you need, I'd be happy to provide it or explain how it was obtained. Um, Erica and I's lines of research began to um, come together more and more over the years, and it was in the last year or so that I began reaching out more to her. And as people can gather, she is more emotionally engaged with people in the Utah area than I am. And I think that has provided us a good blend of her guidance on direction with certain stories and lines of research. Um, and then it can kind of be an advantage for me to have these things at arm's length and be looking at them. And a point came where I was reaching out to her and asking, what about this? What about that? Who should I, as people have seen my blog posts on um, the supposed Havana syndrome at Skinwalker Ranch that was basically what Dr. Green referred to as an injury study, not even a UFO study. I was reaching out to Erica and saying, who should I talk to about this? Who do you think? Who do you think would know some things? And that has been beneficial. That has been helpful, and over time, um, it has become even more helpful to me to for her to have insight into the things happening in the Utah area, and for me to be able to watch her show, see her discuss things with people. And I even began just literally watching YouTube and taking notes of things she was talking about with people that I was going to do records requests on. And then I started asking her and informing her about it as I was doing it. And that's kind of how we got more involved in collaborating.
well, and I love that. I think you and I are a great team together because you excel at so many things, and I've been here, behind the scenes, taking meticulous notes year after year. I mean, with every conversation I'm having, I'm taking personal notes because to me, I want to remember conversations. I've also spent years going up to that community and interviewing people and reaching out to them, the same individuals, over and over again, and creating, a long lasting archive of their experiences over the years and thoughts and things, because I think that's really important. And I look forward to someday with this wonderful archive here, having of course, all of my things will be available as well. And there are a substantial, if you saw the files that I have of my notes on correspondence with Eric Davis, with, different people over the years, Kit Green, it's pretty, Chris Bledsoe. There were many, many, many conversations I had with people that I have not and will not, put forward, but it gave me because they were private, but learning, putting pieces together and then looking at things as they kind of came into my world and saying, okay, wait a minute, now this, here we go, here's this, and I can verify this link, and then I'm looking at things like we both do from a wider lens, looking at the political connections, looking at where money could potentially be, a factor in things, where real estate's a factor. Looking, we again found some interesting links on Harry Reid and some of the players involved here in Utah, and it's quite fascinating. And I know that we've got a lot of work to do, that we will be doing, and I appreciate people understanding the importance of the work that we're doing. And because this is, to me, again, like I said, this is important because I care about the subject. I care about the people that are involved and the people that have witnessed things. I care about the people that have gone to great lengths to preserve history, because it's an important history to preserve. And this is something that should be met with integrity. So I look forward to working with you and Barry and many other people to make sure that we can push things forward and shine a light on this kind of nonsense and get it out of the way. Because in my opinion, people like, Kit Green and Put Off and things like that have offered a lot of fluff, no substance, and misled people for decades, and we've got to put them to bed and stop holding them in high regard.
Yeah, I mean, it really does just come down to some really simple research basics of they should be able to demonstrate a systematic process that they come to their conclusions. And if they can't, those conclusions should not be regarded as significant or of substance until they can. And this is not difficult to understand. And this is why traditionally people have avoided scrutiny. It's really not that difficult to understand that the scientific terminology is applied to things that is not deserved to give it more credibility, and that is as old as the term science. um, the mediums, the crystal ball readers, the people that conduct seances. It's not unusual in the skeptical community for some of the organized skeptical community skeptics to have some talent or interest in parlor tricks and quote unquote magic, because they're interested in it, and they were recreational or even professional magicians themselves, and want to understand how some of these stunts are pulled, and how a public or an audience can be led to believe that they're seeing or experiencing things. And I think that very much applies to what we're talking about here, in that applying the terminology, the verbiage, the lingo of science to things that amounts to sitting around telling tall tales at a breakfast at a conference center in Utah. It's reasonable to start questioning motive, and that is where the codes of ethics and the government procedures and policies do come in. But one of the things I always like to point out is we don't have to know motive in order to accurately identify that the person making the claim has not presented enough evidence for the claim to be substantiated. And that has been going on with this crew for 35, 40 years.
You ain't kidding. And they keep dodging the bullet, and they keep, I mean, there's a younger generation that comes into this
They
subject that
turn
is really,
over, yes, they
yeah,
turn over the
fan club.
audience. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, yeah, it is interesting. And at some point in time, I would love to kind of, not to go off on a different tangent, but I think this is a really interesting thing, to ask these people that have been on coast to coast, and some of the supporters of all of these people, what do you say about promoting Alex Jones? And that's going off there. And I apologize for doing that, but I think this is, it's all relevant. These people are all working together. They're all in. It's just it's fascinating, and so I would ask some of them to make a comment about some of the connections, the nefarious connections to people that they have, and some of the ways even we see with Richard Doty, and the fact that he worked for Hal Puthoff, and the fact that Richard Doty is now a celebrity, and everybody wants to talk to him, and it's like, okay, how can we go from somebody that was clearly pulling stunts and full of it, back when, to now he's like a super cool guy, and why? Like, how do we even get there?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Don't you think some of it comes down to we are flooded in video hosts and podcasters and all this, and if Doty wants to talk, there's a few thousand people that'll give him a mic. Do you think that's part of it?
Probably, I mean, there are definitely people that are, I mean, obviously they're making money on YouTube. Clearly, that's not been my my main goal, but hey, that's okay. I mean, I'm doing what I love, and I'm doing, and talking about things that are important because I care about the subject and the people involved. But it is.
Oh yeah, I've been joking with people about this last article drives another nail through the brewer don't get invited nowhere coffin lid. That's for sure. Um, I think another thing about what you're talking about there, Erica, is there's personal ethics, then there's company ethics, then there's like government codes of ethics,
Right.
literally procedures. And a lot of people, I think, write um, that at various levels, freelance writers, people employed at various companies, people that write books, supposedly nonfiction about UFOs, that need material 3, 4 times a year, if not some of the um, beat writers daily,
Right.
and uh, they have their personal codes of ethics, and if they are within the law, is up to them to deal with and decide the paths they're on. And then we have more corporate, where it they do start to have some liability about different things they've done. Um, Art Bell and the Comet and Heaven's Gate come to mind. That was a big deal at the time.
Right.
Um, Certainly, Alex Jones has been ruled by a jury to have been extremely culpable and responsible for some things that he did. And then government, it's it should be in their policies and procedures and codes. but we're ultimately going to have to come down to ourselves, what we're willing to be responsible for subjecting our attention to. As I talked with various people in Utah over the last several weeks, it was disturbing how it is taken for granted there just is paranormal stuff going on. Like that's not even considered an out there statement. It's like, trees grow in the yard and there's paranormal stuff going on, so blah 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 blah. And it's not even considered by many. It's not even considered an issue anymore. They have been so indoctrinated and conditioned to believe that they do not recognize that as being unsubstantiated, or even something that I might notice as I'm listening to them talk.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just say hello to Paul Carr, who popped in chat, and he mentions the men who stare at goats, the book, not the movie. And then Sean Drew, we're talking about Ingo Swann. And I found in my archive, because there's so much here, I was going through and found a bunch of National Enquirer articles, which they're really hard to come by, but it was all about Ingo Swann and some of the goings ons, way back when. And it's just been fascinating to see some of the people that have come and gone, and or that are still around, and that have Pokemon stakes and Pokemon and things. It's like, oh my Lord. So
National Enquirer was a tabloid. I guess most people know that, but I won't just assume that everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say this. It was a tabloid that had just crazy sensational stories in it. And while many people in today's just onslaught of nonsense constantly that we're subjected to on our phone, on our computer screen. We're listening to it while we're surfing the internet. It's over there on the television for background noise. There was a time that my generation saw these National Enquirers sitting around on the coffee table that our parents would buy, and it looked like a newspaper. It looked like a magazine. It looked like the kind of thing that your parents bought and was believable. And there were whole generations of people just raised on reading about the sheriff in Texas that saw the aliens in the glittery suits and, had pictures. I mean, it's in a newspaper here,
right.
And all of that has an effect. All of that has an effect. And yeah, there are young people watching cable television shows as we speak that, again, like you're saying, that those audiences just keep getting turned over and turned over and turned over. I suspect there are some people in this narrative that sincerely feel attacked by me, by you, that sincerely think their beliefs are being attacked, sincerely do not understand the process of establishing a fact. I think some of them are in here. I think it's complicated. I think there's a variety of people. I think, like some of the skeptics might tell us, incompetence always trumps conspiracy till you prove otherwise. I think there's something to be said for that. But yeah, a bunch of us were just raised reading National Enquirer of all things.
Well, and I mean, it's just, and I love looking back because, like I said, you can't find them. I mean, it's such a treat to go back and look at some of the, not only the Ingo Swann, but Uri Geller, which is just spoon bending and, all of these and put off and the submarines and, I mean, it's just remote viewing and different things. And it's just funny to go back and see, um, just how long and pervasive this has been going on. And in the Inquirer, it's like that should tell us great deals about the quality of information that was going out. And Kelly, you're right. I should do a show once a month with Jack. And I think we've been talking about that, doing a show with
Thank
Expanding
you.
Frontiers Research and talking about things. And Jack, I just want to go back to the point that you brought up about people feeling attacked. I mean, I have had experiences I can't explain. I have been very open about this, and that I think is one of the reasons that keeps me invested in this subject. I will never probably know that what I experienced, but I do know that when I turn to a community like the UFO community or the paranormal community to find a support system, I found anything but. And so that is why I feel so one of the reasons I feel so passionate about kind of showing things that are really harmful to people and moving forward in a positive direction. I mean, there are things that we can't explain. We don't know everything about life in the universe, and that is, one of the great beauties and puzzles of life. And that should be an empowering endeavor for each of us to want to pursue. And so I don't think either you or I are skeptical, and I can understand how people would like to say that we are. I'm to the point where I'm I want factual information, especially from people who have put out crap for decades. I mean, it's time you either put up, you're either a scientist and you know how to do things and use the scientific method and you're transparent, or you're not. Go away.
Yes, and in the geographic area you live, that permeates the culture. I've learned um, in this community, in any kind of fringe um, subject matter and interest. And factual information is not ambiguous. It's not subjective. Uh, we can argue philosophies, we can argue beliefs, but then they must be identified as such. But the factual information that Erica's talking about seeking can be identified through a series of steps or left to be pending further information. Sometimes the best we can do is suspend judgment. Sometimes we can identify it as false. If we can't identify it as false or accurate, then the best we can do is suspend judgment. And either way, that's not ambiguous. We don't have to wonder about that. And we can identify, as I mentioned earlier, we can identify people that are asserting fact that are not qualifying it by definition as fact. And that should be noted.
I made it 1 hour and 48 minutes.
You're doing great.
Yes. So I want to just go because we've got a few minutes till show close, and I want to just show what you have dug up recently. So here we go.
Well, this was actually yes, this relates to something I got recently. This was from March 2022 this year, and was part of a document dump that the Defense Intelligence Agency gave researchers who had been tracking the OSAP and ATIP program. And this was material presented to the Defense Intelligence Agency um, on the work that Bigelow's crew was doing at Bass, and the person who made this particular slide or compose this sheet, it does not necessarily reflect the position of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and it references a contract number and states that Bass, during this contract period, did extensive monthly status reports, um, project management plans, detailed research reports, more than the minimum requirement. And I wanted to see these, so I did a Freedom of Information Act request on that contract number, to which they responded this week. The second paragraph, this is part of the letter. They, in the first paragraph, they acknowledge the subject of the request, and then they state in the second paragraph that the records requested had been destroyed prior to my request, and as procedure and protocol, what we've been talking about, is stipulated by the National Archives and Records Administration. Thank you, Erica. So what that kind of tells us is that that material that the person making those claims about, on that first slide, was apparently not of a lot of value to the DIA, if not an embarrassment. And earlier today, it came to my attention that the person that made the initial claim may have even confused some contract numbers, and there are some other contract numbers to be considered as well. Some of those have been obtained that the release did not include project reports, and what we're looking for to somehow at least give us some frame of reference for the kinds of things that are in Hunt for the Skinwalker and the follow-up book that was more recently, that we would expect to see some documentation. I'm pretty confident at this point that I suspect there's been a lot of embellishment. I think that there were some actual reports, as you have covered.
Oh, it's so frightening.
Yeah, I think there actually were some reports that may have been embellished, and I'll generously say not entirely accurate when they were initially submitted. That may or may not have included cash bonuses for the better stories. So I'm confident at this point that the best we're ever going to get out of this mess is, look, here's where they wrote it down that this happened. And as so far, that's been very difficult to come by. We haven't really even gotten anything that I'm aware of as I sit here tonight at 8:53 p.m. Eastern Time, aware of that. I'm not even aware of any good stories that were written down, and certainly no actual documentation, which reminds me of Robert Schaefer and the stories of the UFOs on the East Coast. And he said, "Doesn't the Navy own any cameras?"
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, and I mean, I have to just say, I mean, the reports that were written by, the people allegedly submitted to the DIA. I mean, if in fact those reports were submitted to the DIA, that's a whole lot of awkward going on. I mean, that's
and does circle back to financial motive to come up with these stories. I mean, that was one of the primary aspects of the Carpenter affair. And beside, for those that don't know, John Carpenter was a pro hypnosis advocate, is, I suppose, a pro hypnosis advocate for alien abduction. And in the late 1990s, mid 1990s, he was working with MUFON and gave Robert Bigelow and his NIDS copies of some 140 case files and hypnosis recordings, reportedly, of possible alien abductees without their knowledge and consent, in the vast majority, if not all, of the cases. And he was financially compensated for this. So there's a lot of ethical issues there. And one of them is, besides just, the complete breach of trust between an investigator, a social worker, and their client, or the investigator and the subject of the investigation, is also that there is financial motive to induce sensational statements from the hypnosis subjects. And these kind of things just have to be taken into account when we're assigning credibility to what, it's just been a farce of the research process.
And that whole thing is just so sad in and of itself, and why people ever continued to follow Bigelow or think that he was, or even try to turn to him now for funding, is really questionable. It's the buying and selling of data like that for what gain? We've never seen anything of substance come out of that. And like I said, with the hundreds of pages of reports that I have that were allegedly submitted to the DIA. I mean, that's a joke. I mean, I don't know what to say. That's if you're the biggest, thing is seeing the cars that are coming to the gate, oh my goodness, okay. And then, we've got the stories of the shape-shifting man beast on the hill and things like that. And it's just like, what, yeah, I don't even know. The whole thing's a joke. The whole thing is a joke, and we do need ethics. And Paul, I wanted to say, Paul made a great comment. Our ethics code forbids recommending hypnosis even by those with credentials, and I think that's really great, Paul. That's why I respect you and your organization so much, and so I appreciate that. And I wanted to say that Ted made a comment. Let me get back here. Skinwalker is a good name for a grift, bad people taking the appearance of the skins they wear. And I think that is absolutely so true. But it will be interesting. And Dino Beavers, yes, I just have to say, for those of you who know me behind the scenes, I've had these great ideas because I love, and thank you, Lord, for the super sticker.
Ludicrous.
Yep. I'm
He's my
glad that you guys
football
are
buddy.
hanging out. I know that is so
Yeah,
cool.
we've been watching football played in the great state of Tennessee on Saturdays.
All right.
Yes, but
That's
please
fun.
continue.
Yeah, it's fun. No, I have I have a strange sense of humor, and so I love doing. I've got this comedy I've mentioned for many years that I want to do a puppet show about ufology, because literally that is what ufology deserves. Is and I've actually tried to make puppets and traumatized my daughter. Whatever, but I think it would be really fun. I've got it in my mind. I've that whatever, and so I was thinking for Halloween I wanted to do a skit about a certain ranch, and the certain characters that have appeared and things. And I ordered all the costumes. I've got them all here. They're ready to go. And so I'm thinking maybe this would be a good time to say, if you like and subscribe to my Patreon account, you too can get a video of me in my shape-shifting werewolf costume being a complete nerd. But that's, sometimes you just have to laugh at some of these
What a
things.
deal.
I know. Where else can you see that? You can't see it anywhere. That's worth something. $5 maybe. I don't, but these masks are
Absolutely.
good. These costumes are good. So anyway, I just had to kind of end on that note because it just, the whole thing makes me, it makes me angry. It makes me feel more passionate about wanting to do what I'm doing because again, we both care about the subject. We want the best. We both understand that, there's something of merit here. And I want to thank you for being such a great research partner and doing a wonderful job on what you've done for the past since we started, our nonprofit organization. There are going to be great things that will be coming out of this, I guarantee. So make sure all of you go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org and put your email name in there, and we'll keep you posted with the latest blog posts. And you can be sure that tonight or yesterday's post was the tip of the iceberg for what we are working on. We put together some things, and so I'm sure there are some people tonight that probably have a little bit of heartburn. And again, if anybody can come forward and have a logical conversation, we invite anybody on the show. I invite anybody on the show. You are more than willing to speak with and have a civil dialogue, a respectful dialogue with people to get information. And like I mentioned earlier, both of us did, when you see people resort to using social media bullying tactics, then there should be a major red flag and a question as to what the motivations are, and obviously the lack of content that these people are that they have. So I think that's what I'm just going to say. So
Truth stands up under scrutiny.
it's amazing how that happens. It's pretty powerful. So I appreciate it. And I want to thank you, Jack, and everyone can go to the UFO Trail to see your wonderful blog. I've looked at it for years. I appreciate it. And I want to, again, congratulate Ted, who is in chat, for being over at the GPAN conference and representing and getting having some insightful conversations, listening to lectures. I want to thank Steve and Peter and Tom and Kelly, all of you, Amy, who have been here, Scott. Thank you guys so much. Cloudy, I've got to go down the list. Lord, Paul, you guys are awesome. I appreciate it. We are creating a cohesive community of people that want to find the truth out, that want respect, that want to use an ethical approach to this. And I know that we are going to do that. We are doing it. We are going to do it. And so let's continue that. So all of you, thank you very much for being here. And I will catch you next week. And it might be a Halloween show. You never know. So anyway, if you guys have costumes that you want to wear, come on the show. Let's do it. We deserve to have some fun. It's been a year. I want to thank Mario also for being behind the scenes. And Mario, very, briefly, clearly there's a car alarm going off outside. I don't know if that's some sort of sign or synchronicity, whatever we're having. But Mario actually had a brief moment where he was showing bats on the screen. And I know that and appreciate that. Yes, the bats. So when I first started doing the show, when I met Mario would always end the show by having bats, like a bat show or a 5-bat show. And it was like, I loved it. So it always just made me laugh and smile to see those bats. So thank you, Mario. You guys rock. So anyway, I will catch you guys next week. Thank you very, very much for being here and for being such a wonderful crowd. Make sure you get the blog that we just wrote and share it with everybody. And in the meantime, I'll be out in the parking lot figuring out what's going on.
That's not your car.
Why stop now?
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful evening. Take care.